It's Father's Day that year. I got a lottery ticket worth $2, while the man my daughter calls Dad got a Caribbean cruise worth thousands of dollars. I smiled, but inside, something in my heart broke. My name is George Miller. I'm 62 years old. A retired engineer, I live alone in an old cabin in rural Oregon. After my wife died, my only daughter, Emily, was all I had left. I thought nothing could separate us until that day. On Father's Day morning, I was invited to the home of Emily and her husband, Brian, a wealthy, polite, but arrogant man. Their house was sparkling, 5 times the size of mine. I arrived wearing the old shirt Emily had given me 10 years ago, and Brian wore a suit as if this were a party in his honor. "Dad, glad you made it," Emily smiled, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, then turned to Brian. "Honey, give Dad his gift." Brian walked over, holding 2 boxes. One was large, wrapped in shiny silver paper. The other was small, thin, barely the size of a hand. He gave the small box to me, and the large box to himself, saying, "This one's for my father-in-law, and this," he pointed to the large box, "for my dad." The room laughed. I tried to laugh with them, but the feeling of being set aside, like an old ornament, stung my chest. I opened the box. Inside was a lottery ticket and a small card. "Good luck, Dad. Who knows, maybe you'll win something. Love, Emily." There was no picture, no "I love you" line Emily wrote every year. Just a few careless words, as if she'd scribbled them between meals. Meanwhile, Brian opened the giant gift box and held up a voucher for a luxury cruise, 7 days, VIP room. Everyone cheered. Emily hugged him, her eyes shining with pride. I sat there, holding the lottery ticket in my hand, smiling awkwardly, pretending it was okay. But in reality, I was so empty inside that I couldn't even hear their laughter anymore. That night, when I got home, I sat in the dark. On the table was the lottery ticket. I considered throwing it away, but then part of me wanted to keep it, not in the hope of winning, but as a token of betrayal. I remember Emily's childhood. She wrote in a card, "Dad, you're my hero. I'll never forget how you fix everything." And now, I am no longer a hero. Just an old man, replaced by a man with more money. 2 days later, as I sat down to breakfast, I turned on the TV. The announcer called out the winning numbers: 08, 14, 27, 33, 42, 49. I smiled faintly and glanced down at the ticket. My heart stopped. That sequence of numbers, identical. I stood up, my hands shaking, my eyes in disbelief. I read it 3 times, checked the date, checked the zip code. It all matched. I just won $250 million. At that moment, I didn't scream or jump up like on TV. I just sat down, quietly looking at the ticket. Tears fell onto my hands, not because I was happy, but because I understood. The gift that my daughter considered a joke was God's way of sending me a terrible test. I wonder, now what, George? What will you do with this gift? Forgive, or make them remember the price of contempt? In the mirror, I saw a different man, no longer gentle and patient, but someone, starting a plan. If they think I'm worth nothing, then I'll show them that $2 gift is worth more than all the pretense they've ever had. I didn't tell anyone about the ticket, not Emily, not Brian, not the world. I folded the ticket carefully and put it in my wife's old Bible, where I knew no one would touch it. Every night I opened it, looked at the numbers, and asked myself, "What now, George? You're old. What do you need money for?" But it's not the money that keeps me up at night. It's the feeling of being forgotten, of being replaced, something no check can heal. A week later, Emily called me. "Dad, we were thinking of visiting you this weekend. You know, it's been so long since we spent time together." Her voice was strangely sweet. I had invited them over dozens of times before, and it was always, "Sorry, Dad, we're busy." Now they were suddenly free? I smiled faintly in my heart, but still said softly, "Sure, sweetheart, I'll make some pie like you used to love." When they arrived, Emily hugged me tightly, and Brian shook my hand with a fake smile. "Heard you've been lucky lately, George." Han Noi, Nhai, Matt. "People say the lottery winners from this area. Pretty wild, huh?" I laughed. "Yeah, pretty wild." His eyes scanned the house, as if searching for something. I knew they had heard. Maybe someone in town had told them, or they had heard the rumor. And I understand. From this moment on, they no longer come for affection. That evening, as they left, Emily said, "Dad, if you ever need help managing, finances or anything, Brian's really good at investments." Her words echoed in my head all night. The next day I drove to the lakeside, a place I used to go with my wife when she was alive. Sitting alone on the old wooden bench, I quietly said, "Mary, you see, our little girl has grown up, but she is no longer the little girl she once was. I raised her to be a good person, but I did not teach her how to truly love." A gentle breeze blew by. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt my heart grow cold. In the following days, Emily called me repeatedly. She asked me what my plans were with that huge sum of money, whether I should invest it or if I needed their help. I didn't confirm or deny it, just silence. My silence drove them crazy. They started coming to my house regularly, pretending to care, bringing food, fixing the fence, cleaning the yard, things they hadn't done in 5 years. One evening, I accidentally heard them talking in the kitchen while I was in the living room. "Brian, if we can just get him to sign something, power of attorney or whatever, the rest is easy." Emily, "Don't say it like that. He's my dad." Brian, "He's an old man sitting on $250 million, Em. He doesn't need it. We do." I sat there, my heart clenched. There was no doubt about it. The only love I had ever believed in had turned into cold ambition. That night, I went out to the backyard and looked up at the sky. The moon was bright and peaceful, but inside, I was in turmoil. I remember when Emily was little, whenever I was angry, she would say, "Daddy, don't frown. When you frown, angels cry." Now, if there were any angels looking down, they would be crying. Because I, the father who once lived by love, was beginning to harbor a plan for revenge. The next day, I went to the bank and set up an anonymous trust. I transferred all my winnings into it under the name of a representative. No one, not even Emily, could trace them. I kept only a small amount, just enough to live on as before. I know they will reveal their true colors soon, and when they do, I will be ready. One afternoon, Brian came alone, speaking softly. "George, we're family, right? Maybe we could help manage the money together. Keep it safe for Emily's future." I looked at him. There was no respect in his eyes, just greed hidden behind a faint smile. "Don't worry, Brian, toy Jop. I know exactly what I'm doing with it." He nodded, but I could see the coldness in his eyes. When he left, I knew. The storm had officially begun. I looked at the old picture of my wife and daughter on the fireplace. "Baby," I whispered, "this is no longer the family we dreamed of. But I will make them remember the price of treating love as a commodity." I was no longer the gentle George they knew. Ever since I heard those words in the kitchen, "He doesn't need it. We do." Something inside me had died, but something else was born, a part of me, cold, clear, and dangerous. I began to plan, not to avenge with blood, but with the truth, something that would make them see their true selves. I needed time. I needed them to believe I was weak, naive, easily manipulated. I needed them to walk into the trap, on their own 2 feet. I called Emily, my voice trembling. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking. Maybe you're right. I don't really know what to do with the money. I might need some advice." Her voice lit up over the phone. "Oh, Dad, I'm so glad you said that. We can come over this weekend and talk everything through." I smiled, not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who knows the game has begun. 3 days later, they arrived. Emily was wearing a white dress, and Brian was carrying a briefcase. I saw him smile as he set it down on the table, as if he were about to close a lucrative deal. "George, I drafted something simple," Brian Noy. "You sign this, and we'll make sure your winnings are invested properly." I put on my glasses, pretended to have difficulty reading, and flipped through the pages. Every line was a trap, transferring ownership of assets, accounts, even the right to decide how to spend them. One signature, and I would lose everything. I looked up at Brian. "That's a lot of legal words, son. Can I think about it a little more?" "Of course," he replied. But I saw the disappointment flash in his eyes. That evening, after they left, I sat at the table, looking at the contract. Then I took out a blank piece of paper and wrote a few simple lines. To whoever finds this, if I ever disappear or die suddenly, please know that my daughter Emily and her husband Brian have motives regarding my finances. I folded the paper and put it in the safe with the old Bible. I wasn't afraid they'd kill me. I just wanted to make sure they wouldn't get away if they tried. The next day I went to the bank. I met Lisa, a middle-aged financial advisor I knew from before. I said bluntly, "Lisa, I need to make a will, but I want to do it quietly." She looked at me seriously. "You think someone might try to manipulate you?" I laughed. "Not think, Lisa, I know." We drew up a new will together. I left a portion to charities and a secret portion, kept in a sealed envelope that would not be opened until my death. No one but Lisa knew what was inside. I continued to act. Every time Emily came, I pretended to be weak, spoke more slowly, even left the bottle of pills on the table like an old person afraid of forgetting. One evening, while she was helping me sort out the medicine, I asked, "Do you really think Brian's good with money, sweetheart?" She smiled, a little embarrassed. "He's smart, Dad. He just wants the best for us." I nodded. "I'm sure he does." She didn't realize that in my eyes at that moment, there was something both broken and determined. I started transferring money from the anonymous fund to several small accounts, in other people's names, some to charities, some to scholarship funds I set up anonymously. No one could trace it. I kept the rest, enough to create bait. I emailed Emily, "Sweetheart, I've decided to give part of the money to you and Brian now, while I'm still here. Maybe around $2 million just to see how you handle it." Just 10 minutes later, she called back. Her voice was trembling, mixed with excitement. "Oh my God, Dad, you're serious?" "Yes, honey, you and Brian deserve it." Something in my heart tightened. I knew that from now on, they would reveal everything, not because of the small amount of money, but because I was fueling their greed. 3 days later, they arrived. Brian held an expensive bottle of wine. Emily brought flowers. The atmosphere was so fake that I found it hard to breathe. When I handed them the symbolic check, their eyes lit up like two children seeing candy. Emily hugged me and said, "Dad, I can't thank you enough." I replied softly, "Just promise me you'll use it wisely." She nodded. Brian just smiled, the kind of smile that comes from someone who has just won a big bet. That evening, as they left, I watched the luxury car disappear into the darkness. I knew the first step of the plan had worked. They will spend that money faster than they think, and when they come back for more, I will show them. It is not their money they are losing. It is their soul. I looked at the picture of my wife. "Mary, if you were alive, you would probably tell me to stop. But I can't. I don't take revenge out of hatred. I do it out of justice, because this father's love has been betrayed." Outside, the rain began to fall. The sound of it mingled with the beating of my heart, slow, heavy, and sure. Time flew by. Just 3 weeks after I handed over the $2 million check, Emily and Brian threw a big party at their house. They invited friends, neighbors, and old acquaintances from around town. The reason was Happy Father's Day, and to George Miller, the luckiest dad of the year. I laughed when they said that. Lucky? No. I was just lucky that I finally saw clearly who they were. When I arrived, the house was bright. Music was playing, the table was full of delicious food. People were laughing, raising their glasses, taking pictures. In the middle of the room, Brian had his arm around my shoulder, laughing loudly, saying to everyone, "This man right here, the legend himself, he's got a heart of gold, and a wallet to match." Everyone burst out laughing. I laughed too, but inside, each laugh felt like a knife cutting me. Emily came over and put her hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I'm so proud of you. Everyone's talking about how generous you are." I looked into her eyes. There was no warmth, just the look of someone holding a property in her hands, not of a daughter looking at her father. After dinner, Brian picked up his glass of wine and tapped it lightly, signaling silence. "Let's make a toast, Han Noi, Jeong Hung Hon, to family, love, and prosperity, to George for showing us all what true luck looks like." Everyone shouted, "Cheers!" Glasses clinked, laughter echoed throughout the room. I took a sip, then put the glass down. "Actually," I said slowly, "there's something I'd like to say too." The room gradually quieted down. All eyes turned to me. I stood up. My voice was hoarse, but strong. When I first got that lottery ticket, I didn't think much of it. It was just a small piece of paper, a joke, maybe, a reminder of how small I'd become in my daughter's eyes. Some people chuckled, thinking I was joking, but I didn't laugh. But you know what's funny? That $2 joke changed everything. It showed me who really cared and who only smiled when money walked in the door. The atmosphere began to get heavy. Emily looked at me, her lips trembling slightly. "Dad, maybe we should talk about this later." I raised my hand, interrupting. "No, sweetheart, we talk now, tonight. Because this party isn't about family, it's about greed." I took an envelope from my pocket. Inside was a copy of the contract Brian had given me to sign. I held it up to the light. This, Toy Noi, is what my son-in-law calls love, a neat little plan to take everything I have, signed under the name of trust. Murmurs arose. Brian turned pale and tried to smile. "George, come on, that's a misunderstanding." I threw the envelope on the table. "A misunderstanding doesn't have your lawyer's signature on it, Brian." No one laughed anymore. The air was thick. Emily took a step back, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Dad, I didn't know about that, I swear." I looked at her. My eyes softened, but my voice remained steady. "I wish I could believe you, but you stood there, in my kitchen, and watched him do it. And you said nothing." I took another piece of paper from my pocket. The real check. Everyone's eyes were glued to it. The number was so large that the whole room held its breath. "Here's the truth, Toy Noi Cham Rai. This isn't even real money anymore. I've already given most of it away. To hospitals, schools, shelters, places that actually need it." Brian gasped. "You... what?" "I kept only what I needed to live, and a small part to teach one final lesson, Toy Noi. Money can buy a yacht, a mansion, a crowd, but it can't buy decency." No one said anything. The music stopped. Only the clock ticked. I walked closer to Emily and took her hand. "Sweetheart, I don't hate you. I just wish you'd remembered the man who used to fix your bike every summer, who worked double shifts so you could have braces, who held you when you had nightmares. That man wasn't rich, but he loved you with everything he had." Her tears fell silently. Brian stood there, frozen, his face pale. I turned back and looked around the room. "Enjoy the rest of your party, Toy Noi, because it's the last time money will ever be the reason I'm invited." I put down my glass and walked to the door. No one stopped me. The party stood still as a statue. The door slammed shut, like a full stop. As I drove home, I noticed the rain had started to fall. The drops of water hit the windshield, blending with the slow beating of my heart. I didn't know if I had just won or lost everything. But I knew one thing. The truth had been revealed, and nothing could cover it up. When I got home, I opened my Bible and took out the letter I had written. I read it again and smiled. I hadn't sent it to anyone yet, but maybe soon I would. Maybe someday when I'm gone, she'll read this, Toy Titam. And maybe then she'll understand what love really costs. I left the party that night in the rain. No one saw me off, no one said a word. Only the yellow light slowly faded through the car windows, like memories were erasing themselves. But I know. It's not over. People like Brian don't know when to stop. Money is more than wealth to him. It's power. It's the measure of a man. And I just took it all away from him. 2 days later, I received a call. Strange number, but familiar voice. "You think you're so smart, George?" It was Brian. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. You've ruined Emily's future." I was silent. "Do you think it's noble to give money to charity? You're just a stubborn, lonely old man who will die alone." I smiled slightly. "Maybe. But at least I'm not living off other people's money." He was silent for a second. "You will regret it. Hang up." I knew he meant what he said. Brian was the type of guy who wouldn't back down. And I also knew he'd find a way to fight back, if not by law, then by trickery. A few weeks later, as I expected, the police came knocking. They brought a summons. Brian accused me of tax fraud and concealment of assets. I sat in the interrogation room for 4 hours. I wasn't scared, just sad. My son-in-law had really chosen that path. I didn't recognize him anymore. When I was released, I called my personal lawyer, Mr. Harris, an old friend I trusted. "George," he said, "I've looked at the files. Don't worry, it's all in the plan. Remember that old contract you sent me? That's what's going to save you." I nodded, smiling. Because, yes, I had prepared. Since Brian started taking such an interest in my assets, I've made copies of all the paperwork, given them to Harris and the bank. Everything Brian signed, every email, every transaction, I have the originals. And the money? I've transferred most of it to a trust under a special beneficiary name. That person was Emily. 3 days later, Brian was called in for questioning. He didn't know that I had provided the police with evidence, the forged contract, and a recording of him discussing the forced sale with his lawyer. I heard them say he went crazy, banging on the table, screaming that I had set him up. Maybe true, but it's not the trap, it's the consequence. Emily came to my house that evening. She stood outside the door for a long time, then knocked gently. I opened it. Her eyes were red. "Dad, he's been arrested. They said he forged your signature." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me, her lips trembling. "Did you do this?" I didn't answer, just poured 2 cups of tea and invited her to sit down. "Sweetheart, you once told me I was lucky. But the truth is, luck has nothing to do with this. Choices do. Every choice comes with a price." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know what he was planning." I put my hands on the table. "Maybe you didn't, but you let him use you, and that's almost the same thing." Silence, just the sound of the clock and heavy breathing between the two. A moment later, she asked softly, "What happens now?" I looked out the window where the rain was still falling. "Now, he faces what he built, and you decide who you want to be next." Weeks passed. The scam was reported in the press, accounts were frozen, Brian was formally prosecuted. The internet was buzzing about the old man who won the lottery and was betrayed by his own son-in-law. I didn't read the rest. One sentence caught my attention. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And I was right. I didn't need the noise. I just needed peace back. A month later, I received an undelivered envelope. Inside was the old lottery ticket, the one that had changed my life, and a scrawled note. "I'm sorry, E." I smiled. I didn't know where Emily was writing from, or what mood she was in. But for the first time, I felt something melt inside me. Forgiveness, maybe, or just relief. That night, I went out to the porch where I used to sit with my cold coffee. The wind blew, carrying the sound of crickets and the smell of damp earth. I looked up at the sky, thinking of my ex-wife, who always told me, "Don't let money tell you who to love, George. Let your heart do it." I whispered, "I finally did, honey. I finally did." September. The leaves start to fall. Every morning I wake up early, make a cup of coffee, sit on the porch, and watch the sun rise over the hills. I sold the old house and moved to a smaller town near a lake. Quiet, no one recognizes me as the old man who won the lottery, and I like it. My life is simple now. Gardening, reading, volunteering at an orphanage. No noise, no pretense, no masked parties. I thought it was all over, that the money, the betrayal, the tears, all buried in time. But life always has a way of making us look back one last time. One afternoon, I received a call from Harris's law office. "George," he said, "I need to see you. It's about your trust fund and Emily." I was speechless. It had been almost 3 months since I heard the news of Brian's conviction. Emily had disappeared afterward, and no one knew where she went. I drove to Harris's office. He greeted me with a strange look, some sad, some warm. "Sit down, George. I think you should read this." He handed me a large, yellow, sealed envelope. Inside was a letter and a stack of bank records. I opened the letter. The handwriting was Emily's dad. "I know I don't deserve to call you Dad, but I want you to know I see things clearer than ever. Brian told me to just be quiet and everything would be okay, but I was wrong. That silence made me lose you, lose myself. I talked to Attorney Harris. I asked him to transfer my entire trust fund to your name. I don't want any of it. I just want to call you Dad again. I'm leaving the state. I want to start over, not with money, but with my conscience. Maybe someday, if you'll let me, I'll come back to visit. Happy belated Father's Day, Dad. This time, it's from my heart. Emily. My hands were shaking as I put the letter down. I couldn't speak. Every memory came flooding back to me. From the first time I held her to the last time I closed the door behind her. It all seemed like slow motion. Harris looked at me and said softly, "She came here a week ago, George. She cried a lot, but she really wants to change." I nodded, my eyes still glued to the last line of the letter. I didn't know whether I was laughing or crying. I just felt a strange feeling, as if my old heart had been awakened by someone. That evening I sat by the lake. The full moon shone on the still water. I brought with me the old lottery ticket, the one that had started it all. I put it on the water, let the wind blow it away. Goodbye, old friend, Toy T Tom. You gave me everything money could buy, and then took it all away to show me what really matters. Tears fell, mingling with the small waves, but this time I didn't feel pain. I only felt peace. A few weeks later, I received a small package. The sender was unknown. Inside was a photograph. In the photo, Emily was standing in front of a small house in the countryside, holding a few orphanage children, smiling brightly. Behind the photo is the text, "We're okay, Dad." I hung the picture on the wall. I looked at it every morning as I walked out the door, not to remember the past, but to remind myself that forgiveness is the greatest gift a father can give his child. A year later, the local TV station did a report. The man who won $250 million in the lottery disappeared. The host said, "No one knows where he lives, but it is said that he has donated most of his fortune to education and poor children." When asked why, he simply said, "Because love is the only fortune worth keeping." The camera panned to the lake. An old man was fishing, smiling kindly, wearing a worn hat. No one knew it was me, and perhaps I didn't need anyone to know. I looked out into the distance. The wind blew gently across the lake, carrying a gentle chill. I closed my eyes and smiled. "Happy Father's Day, sweetheart," I whispered. "This time, I'm the lucky one."